when we talk about touch points, what digital transformation decisions did you need to do with Bio to produce the digital ecosystem that you have today?
Yeah. So great question. So first off, Bio is the world's largest trade association representing biotechnology companies. So we represent about 1,000 member companies in the biotechnology space, from pharmaceutical companies to companies working on climate solutions, to companies working on alternative fuel sources, to like GMO crop producers. So we represent kind of the waterfront on biotechnology. Part of our issue going into the digital transformation project that we undertook starting in 2018 was that we had 6 different websites, all different CMSs, all different levels of technology, all different levels of security updates and patches and things like that, all different levels of sunsetting the technology. I mean, it's a story that I'm sure all your listeners are very familiar with. So we went into the project knowing that we needed to consolidate all of these platforms into one, and then how we do that to maintain brand look and consistency sort of across all of the different sites. So that was kind of our primary goal going into the project. We also knew we had a lot of external data source systems that we needed to bring in. So we were working with systems like Salesforce, which is our member source of record. So we knew that we wanted to bring in some information on our members, specifically our board of directors. We knew that we hosted events. So we needed to bring in some of our event systems related to speaker management. We use a system called Hub. We knew we needed to bring in different things related to our exhibitors, our pavilion organizers. Bio has a big one-on-one partnering system. So we're sort of the match.com for the biotech community, if you will. So we knew we wanted to bring in that information as well. So we knew we needed a super scalable solution in order to facilitate all that while growing. Fortunately, we were lucky that we started this project in advance of COVID. We actually wrapped up the project November of 2019. So that put us in a really great position going into COVID and sort of the work from home digital first model that we've seen emerge over the last 9 months to really create a content centric newsroom. So we were no longer being reactive in what we were doing, we were being proactive in pushing content. So in the period between about March 15th and June 15th, so kind of early on in the COVID situation, we were able to put out the same amount of content we did in the previous 3 years in those 3 months. And that really wouldn't have been possible unless we had this digital transformation complete, wrapped up in advance of the pandemic.
I like hearing that because that's a lot of forward thinking, and it's a change in the company direction too as well. So whenever you're looking at the nexus of success, you're always considering, executive champions who want to look forward as opposed to kind of just keeping it level and keeping everything at the same pace and reacting to situations instead of getting ahead of the curve, especially when we talk about digital. Everybody's just, you always hear it, people are trying to keep up. So the people that are involved in these projects really have to be taken into account. And that's my second question. Who were the key people involved in the rollout and how did they make this project successful?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think having those executive champions is critically important to get a project like this off the ground because you are talking a very significant um, outlay of resources, both staff time and expenses. So I think that's very critical. And I think we were going into the project and we had to do a lot of selling to kind of get here, which again, I'm sure your listeners are really familiar with looking at digital budgets to be able to sell the vision. But I think the vision has really shown its value tenfold now that we've gone into the pandemic environment because one of the only ways you can show value is digitally. So I think the lift is becoming easier for digital practitioners in order to put that value forward. Where my company was primarily focused on in-person events, obviously those did not happen for 2020. There's obviously a big question mark on 2021. So I think showing value digitally is how you do that. But back to your question related to the people, I think one of the biggest decisions we made early on was to stick with our current vendor, Publicis Sapient, to really be the driving force behind our digital transformation. We worked with a whole host of folks on their team, from architects to developers, UX, UI, all across the gamut. So kind of brought all their resources to bear in order to kind of facilitate our digital transformation. One of the things we did internally, which I would highly recommend to folks getting started, is we created a core team. So a multidisciplinary team of 6 people who sort of led the project from a strategy level. So they were the ones who made the decisions, and we always brought everything back to the core team. So design, any implementation decisions, anything related to integrations, everything came back to the core team. So having that group sort of guide the whole process, I led that team. Having that group guide the process was really successful. So it was a multidisciplinary team. And that really made all the difference in our success. So we had buy-in from across our different stakeholders in order to push the project forward.
So was the core committee more of the centralized hybrid then than it was more of that federated model that you typically see with organizations? So it wasn't a top-down structure. It was allowing the core team to do what they needed to do on their certain specific channels and then branch out from there to the key stakeholders.
That's absolutely right. So we wanted the core team to be sort of at the worker bee level, if you will.
Yeah.
So folks who were actually going to be involved in sort of pushing the buttons when the project was done. So we were very cognizant that we did not want an executive level core team that was sort of just going to dictate strategy. We wanted folks who were actively engaged in the process, knew the stakeholders, and were then ultimately going to be using the system. And we also made sure that they were bought in from the back end perspective as well, because I think sometimes folks want to make the front end look as pretty as possible for the customer experience and everything, and then you have a not so great back end experience. So we knew we wanted going in the back end to be as nice as the front end from a user perspective for our staff, to make sure that staff was able to produce content very quickly and iterate very quickly. So we're actually launching a new website this week that's based off of the same sort of architecture. So we just spun up a new version of the site. We launched that in about 3 weeks. So we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't build it correctly the first time.
When you start with business strategy, you really have to get into SMART goals and you have to get into those KPIs. What were the KPIs that really came out of this project that were successful? And maybe you could even tell me that even gleaned more success from what you were thinking.
So I think when we looked at our goals, we basically had 3. They were unify, empower, and connect. Those were kind of our 3 broad goals. So we wanted to unify, obviously, all of our systems. We wanted to bring everything together. We wanted to create those API integrations to make sure that systems are feeding to the public website, so we're not doing duplicative data entry, which was a problem previously. Again, I'm sure something everyone can relate to. So we wanted to make sure everything was unified. Then we wanted to empower both our end user or customer in order to make the decisions they need, whether or not to join Bio as a member, whether or not to attend an event, to advocate on a particular piece of legislation. So we wanted to be able to empower our end user or members or customers. And then we also wanted to empower our Bio staff. So we wanted them to be able to feel like they could go into the content management system, into Drupal, create content, and then be able to put that forward. So we wanted them to feel comfortable with using the system and be empowered. And then last is connect, and obviously bringing everything together to be able to tell the story of our events when you're talking about our advocacy work, and be able to tell the advocacy or the event story and vice versa. So we wanted to be able to bring all of that together and connect it for everyone. We're now starting some additional phases related to personalization and connecting it even more, but we've laid the foundation through this initial project.